Hi, everyone, and welcome to Get Hired Live. My name is Andrew Seaman. I'm the LinkedIn news editor focused on job search and careers. I am also the editor of Get Hired, which is a weekly newsletter and these wonderful conversations we have every week. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start off, as I always do, by asking you to introduce yourselves in the comments. I know a few of you have already started. So introduce yourself in the comments. Tell us a little bit about where you are, what you're looking for, where you're looking for work. That way you can connect with each other. One of the most important parts of job searching is to network. So what you're going to want to do is, if you see someone who works in the industry you want to work in, if someone's looking for work where you want to look, maybe connect and look together. One of the greatest things that happen from the show is that I get notes from people that say they job search together or they communicate with each other as a way to help them find work. So do that and start your networking now. It's a great time to start networking if you haven't already. And as always, once you do that, please get your questions in. We're going to be talking about how to find a job in this difficult environment. We have a great guest coming up, so be sure to get those questions in. And in fact, let's bring our guest on now. So our guest is Chris Villanueva, who is the founder and CEO of Let's Eat Grandma, which is one of my favorite names for a resume writing service, but also you do much more than that. So Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, Andrew, thanks so much for having me on. I am so excited to get into it with you about resume tips and who knows what.
Exactly. And so can you tell us, first of all, where Let's Eat Grandma came from? So I know where it came from in terms of the grammatical side of that. But can you tell everyone watching, where the name came from?
Yeah, so there's an old grammar joke that I like that says if you take the comma out of Let's Eat Grandma, you're saying, well, you want to eat your grandmother. And clearly we don't want to eat our grandmothers. We're not cannibals here. We'd rather eat with her. So we choose to include the comma in there. It's an old joke I was a really big fan of. Our company is really big into punctuation, grammar. Those types of details are important for us. And I just wanted to kind of have a little bit of fun with our company name.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And I think it shows that punctuation is important because your business name says it all. So great. Well, thanks for joining us. We have so many people joining the stream already. We have Sophia from Spain, Cindy from St. Louis, Jaden from New Jersey, Angel from Chicago, Ron from Texas. And I know I've seen some people from India chiming in. So this is fantastic. We have such a wonderful group here. So let's dive in with a question about one of your specialties, which is resume writing. And for people out there who are job seekers, what's the number one mistake you see job seekers making on their resumes?
Yes, great question. The number one mistake I see job seekers making, or people who are looking to revamp their resumes, is being too many things for too many people. Trying to be the jack of all trades, the generalist, to apply for one specific position, when in reality, we need to do whatever we can to get noticed for that specific position. So, and this is something that I see in common with resumes that on paper, I look at them and I see, wow, this has such an awesome design, or the phrasing is on point. They're very tight with their action verbs, things like that. But when I look at the types of positions that these people are applying for, I see so much opportunity really to connect that job posting with that resume more. So I think that's something that probably 95% of the people listening to this may be able to benefit from today.
Definitely. And, for people who maybe struggle with that idea of having an all-encompassing master resume that you send off everywhere, and like you said, is the jack of all trades resume, how can people tailor their resume? Because you're not suggesting people throw, the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. You're talking about sort of tweaking it for each position, right? Or are you literally saying to rebuild it each time?
That's such a good question. And to call out something, a brilliant phrase, which I love using myself, is the concept of a master resume. I think every single job seeker out there should have their own master resume that is, heck, 3, 4, 5, however many pages they want. But I do recommend people get specific with the jobs they're applying for and cut it down and tweak it. Now, to answer your question, Andrew, I don't want people to go crazy. I don't want people to just lose their minds over creating resumes. And I know people definitely have been doing that. I once had a awesome woman who said that she spent about 80 hours, kid you not, working on a resume within the span of 2 weeks. And I'm not advocating for that whatsoever. But what I do recommend is doing what I call these micro tweaks on your resume as you start sending them out to job postings, because it's not really going to take too much of your time if you know exactly what the job postings are looking for, and you're going to get some more bang for your buck when it comes to your job applications.
Got it. And yeah, 40 hours a week is literally a full-time job. So,
Right.
I've heard of job seekers saying that, looking for work is a full-time job, but that might be taking it a little bit too far if that's just spent on your resume. But we have so many questions, so let's get to them. And if you're just joining us, I'm Andrew Seaman. I'm a LinkedIn news editor focused on job search and careers. And I'm joined with the founder and CEO of Let's Eat Grandma, Chris Villanueva. So let's dive into a few of them. So we have one, and I think this applies to a lot of people because we got a few questions ahead of time about this too. Liz says she just moved from Seattle from DC. How do you job search in a new area during a pandemic?
Such a good question. And I feel your pain. I know how hard it can be to transition from one city to another. And I imagine being at this specific time, it makes it harder because we're so used to maybe attending in-person events and shaking hands physically with people in a different city, which makes it hard. Now, I will say that I have never more than now seen such an explosion of opportunity online to make connections and to be able to meet people and to get your face in front of awesome people who are going through the same thing. Meetup.com, and once again, I'm not affiliated with them. I've been a member for the last few years. One thing that I was afraid of with my own meetup group was not being able to connect with people in person, and a lot of those people come from different cities. But one thing that I've noticed is a lot of these events nowadays are just moving to strictly virtual. So there are opportunities to attend these in-person meetup events, whether or not you move to Seattle or Austin or wherever, to connect with people. And highly recommend, as being your number one job strategy, is to virtually shake hands and meet those and connect with those people who are going to be in your area. And if you don't know who those people are, finding connections that can get you there, I think, can take you a long way. But great question.
Yeah, and I think like the power of informational interviews is really important in these scenarios too, where like you said, you can meet up with people, but you could also just like send them a note and say, hey, listen, can I just learn a little bit about what you're doing or what your company does, or even sort of what the job market is like. And a lot of people, especially when that's a soft ask, you're not asking them for a job. You'll be surprised at how open they will be to actually making some time for you. So I think those are really great suggestions. It doesn't hurt to ask, basically.
Exactly.
And we have so many questions coming in about career changing, because I think a lot of people, especially during the pandemic, they get to a point where they say, you know what, there's so much going on, I'm going to reevaluate everything, including the path I'm on. So when it comes to changing careers, we have questions from Jaden, Aaron, and Matthew. How do you handle that on a resume? There's obviously a bunch of variables, but for someone who's looking to change careers, what are your best practices for them?
Yeah, excellent question. It's something that it's not easy. I'll admit, being the resume writer idealist over here, I'll say it's not easy to write resumes like that, but it is possible. The first thing I recommend you do, and this, to be honest, could be the most difficult part, but is to get really clear on the specific positions that you're applying for as a job seeker. Because once you do that, writing the resume is just going to become 3 or 4 times easier than it would have been. So actually get some music on, just get in your own brainstorming, soul searching mindset, and figure out really what your strengths are. I'm not a career coach or anything like that, but I know the value of figuring out what your strengths are and figuring out those top 2 to 3 positions that you think that you can really thrive in, and then really going from there. So yeah, that's recommendation number 1. And then recommendation number 2, once you're really clear on what positions that you're best suited for, is doing a technique I like to call the highlighter exercise. It is one of my favorite things that I've really taught. But with the highlighter exercise, what you do is you go throughout your resume and you highlight in yellow the most relevant keywords for the positions you're applying for. And in pink, I like to call those the kind of half relevant things that may or may not be transferable. Highlight those things in pink. And after that, Andrew, you're left with white, things that have not been highlighted. And those are really the things that you should either seek to remove from the resume or seek to find a way to spin or transfer to make them more applicable to the job you're applying for.
Yeah. And I think, one thing that comes down to is that you sort of have to, comes down to the customizable resume where, you're pivoting for each position almost. So even if you're career changing, it sounds like, when you have the position in mind, when you have the company in mind, it makes things a lot easier because it's not just about changing careers. It's about tailoring your experience to the employer. Cool.
Exactly.
Great. And we have a lot of questions here about career gaps. And I think this is a question that's growing on a lot of people's minds, especially during the pandemic, because, maybe people were laid off in March or April, and that's now turning into, 4, 5, 6 months now. So for people who have an employment gap, maybe it is only, 4 or 5 months, but maybe it's longer. Maybe people were unemployed before, they were trying to get back into the job market now. How do you handle career gaps on a resume? Because I think this gives a lot of people anxiety, especially if the gap was 5, 6 years raising children or taking care of a loved one. How should people handle that on a resume?
What I would tell people, and this is from getting a lot of questions about career gaps in the past, is have no fear. It is going to be okay. And you are not less valuable on paper because of that resume gap. And I know that's hard for some people to hear, but I know a lot of people get really worked up on the fact that they haven't worked for the last 5 or 6 months. But I will say, even during this time of the pandemic, I think really recruiters understand, hiring decision makers understand that this is a really turbulent time. And most people are probably going to start defaulting to thinking anyway, it's because of things related to the economy and not, I don't know, the fact that, letting people's minds run wild for whatever reason that you may have had that resume gap. So the two things I really recommend when it comes to the resume is, first of all, I don't recommend, I'm not a big proponent of calling out the resume gap like some people like to do on the resume. Some people like to say laid off at this month and this month for whatever reason. Not a fan, because I think the resume is really your marketing piece, and that's something that might detract away from your skill set. So one thing that I might do instead is find a way to show meaningful work that you're doing right now, whether it be volunteer work or things that you're learning, and showcase that within a cover letter to really highlight that you're an active person and you're still with it. So if you're in resume gaps, if you're in resume gap world, do not worry. There is hope. It's just a matter of tweaking your resume and saying the right things in that cover letter.
Mm-hmm. And also, because I'm the host of the show and I'm selfish, coming up on Get Hired on Monday, we're going to be talking about cover letters. So stay tuned for that on the newsletter. And this is a question that actually came up last week too, and I don't know if we actually got to it, but Jeannie's asking, as a contractor or temp employee, how do you market yourself effectively when you've worked for positions for less than 6 months? In some cases, it can look unstable in employment. How do you market oneself? And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things that I've heard is if you are a temp employee or a contractor and you want to stay in that type of employment setting, people hire contractors expecting to see that on a resume, but the difficulty comes in when you're looking for a full-time job that is going to last you several years, right?
Correct. Yeah. And I know the concern, because it's people, when they come to me with those same concerns, are afraid they're going to look like a job hopper, Andrew, which it's like the fear that everyone has if they've had short stints on their resume. But if you are, if you're in that situation, you're looking to make a transition to full-time work, a couple of things you can try out. The first thing might be, I use this method called the 2-tier resume, in which you take your professional experience and you potentially chop it in half. You create 2 different sections from that professional experience. I owe that one to Professor Snow, one of my professors in college, who was really awesome. So what you can do within those 2 tiers is first show the non-contract work, and then have another section for contract work to really differentiate that and to show that it was contracted. And the second thing, of course, is just that cover letter, really stating your intent to move on to a full-time position, whereas you've been doing contract work for some time.
Got it. And a follow-up to that in terms of like short positions, I just saw on the stream, I believe it was Pepper asked, if you have a job for 3 months and the employer is terrible and has a bad reputation, and you just sort of say, okay, I'm done. I've only been here 3 months, but I don't want to spend any more time here. Do you have to put that on your resume, or how do you handle things like that? And I know a lot of people where they like maybe leave one job and they say, oh, I'm going to this new employer. They get there, it's a horror show, and they come back to their previous employer. So how do people deal with those?
Pepper, you are not alone. There are other people I've talked to who have been in the same situation. Quite frankly, and I think I've said this already, but your resume is a marketing piece. It's not this completely. It's not like, I think of like federal resumes in which you have to include like everything, and it has to be really spot on with your timeline. But if you think that it's something that doesn't really belong on the resume, or something that is not only just a really bad point in time, but something that was completely irrelevant to the positions you're applying for, it is completely okay to remove that from the resume. And it's something that I've done in the past. But, I could think of maybe one situation in which I'd leave it on, and that's if it gave you a really relevant experience that would help, kind of like stepstone over to the next role. So that's a really good question, actually.
Got it. And we have a question here from Brad that is specific. And I really like when companies do this. Basically, he's saying, and I don't like when companies lay off people, but they're giving him a lot of lead time. So he says, a large group from my company has been laid off. I'm lucky enough to know my last day will be early March of 2021. So that's, several months in the future. So I'm cultivating relationships now. Awesome job, Brad. How far before my last day at my current job do I search for my next one? I think there might be some people who are in this position and maybe some people who are furloughed. What are your thoughts on that?
And this sounds maybe aggressive, but it's something that I would do if I was in your situation. But I am a huge fan of long-term networking, and I'm a huge fan of telling myself that there is no better time to network than when you don't need a job tomorrow. So I would take that, and I would start to build meaningful relationships and start to really connect with people who are within your industry, within your dream job, like right now, like today, because it's coming. I wouldn't do it necessarily with the intent to say, hey, I need a job. Can I apply for a job? But I might do it with the intent, going back to the informational interviews thing that Andrew mentioned at the beginning of this, to really connect with those people and find out more about them and their industry and what makes them successful. I believe that those are the types of relationships that can help lead to that future job in 2021 and beyond.
I agree. I think, Brad, after the show's done, keep watching, please. But after the show's done, work on the strategy. And if you see something come up, and it doesn't hurt, maybe a package or something you're going to receive, it might be a great idea to start looking now, or start sowing those seeds. You're obviously starting to do that, but the potential long-term gain of full-time employment may be worthwhile to look for now. And then when you get that offer and you start getting your momentum going, you can weigh those possibilities. So I think that's excellent advice, and I don't think it's aggressive at all, Chris. So I think that's great advice.
Thank you.
And then, when it comes to recent graduates, we have a question here from LD. And she is doing she just did graduate education. She says, for people who just finished a master's program in design and have no experience in industry, but it is willing to get fully involved in it, how to face companies who are looking for 5 years experience in candidates. So I think that a lot of graduates experience that, where they graduate from undergrad or their master's degree and they don't have necessarily a ton of real world experience, but they just graduated and all the job postings say, minimum 3-5 years. What should people in that position do?
Yeah, great question. And I feel your pain of being the recent graduate at one point with limited experience. I would tell you that, first of all, job postings aren't 100% accurate. And I think that's something that a lot of us know kind of deep down on the inside. So even if something says 5 years and you have less experience, don't think that you're not a qualified person for that role, because you very well could be. So I would recommend, first of all, going back to in-person networking, which I believe is probably one of the best ways to get jobs. It probably is the best way to get a job. Versus going through applicant tracking systems and just applying solely online. I'm not saying not to apply online, but really relying on those in-person connections, especially as a career changer, especially as a recent graduate, can take you a long way. And the second thing I would say to that is there is always an opportunity to go and get that experience right now, whether or not it is a paid at $60K, $70K job or whatever you want. There's always that opportunity to go out, to get involved, to get certifications, to volunteer for things, to see if you can shadow somebody, and to get that experience. Because when you get that experience, you're really going to have an awesome opportunity to sell yourself in an interview, and you're going to get the job eventually.
Yeah, and I think one thing to always know about job postings is that most of the time they're wish list. When you're a kid and maybe before a holiday or a birthday, you sort of say, "Here's my wish list." You're not getting the pony and the bicycle, so you have to settle for what comes your way. So even if you don't meet everything on the list, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be accepted. You may not be the perfect candidate. Maybe there is the perfect candidate, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be automatically rejected. It might just be that, they have to train you a little bit more on the job. So that's something that I always keep in mind, is that, job postings are wish list and not necessarily required.
True.
And, when it comes to, people who want to make a career change without going back to school. So, maybe they do want to, be something that's a little bit out of the adjacent area of their career, but they don't have the ability to go back to school. What should those people do? So that's from Janine. What do you think people should do to sort of earn street cred almost when they're changing careers?
Yeah, no, definitely. I would ask if the reason is because of finances, then I would say that there are still really solid learning opportunities out there. And if you really have that craving to learn, which I'm a huge fan of continuous adult education and learning, there are plenty of courses online that you can take for free to help sharpen up that skill set and to really get to where you need to be. And going back to it, I am a fan of online courses, video. I just said it 2 seconds ago. But I'm even more of a fan of going out and getting my hands dirty with that actual experience, whether it be paid or not paid. So, for instance, if I'm really passionate about coding and that's an industry that I want to get in the future, I might start to build some exciting programs for me that I can start to build that online portfolio to start driving attention towards that and to hone my skill set.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And then we have some questions too that I wanted to get to because I think it applies to some people. And so Sharu asked, should you list your physical location on resumes for out-of-state jobs? And I know this is something that comes up whether you're during a pandemic or not. And what's your advice for people who maybe are looking in, Wisconsin, but they currently live in Florida?
Yeah, locations are tough, but it's possible. Kind of going back to what I said earlier. First of all, I recommend, and this is a mistake I see a lot of people making. Generally, I would take off the address on that resume, like your physical address. That's something that's a little outdated, and you can run into some potential security issues as well. Your city, your state that's completely okay, and in most cases, I am a fan of being transparent with employers and letting them know where you're at, because they'll probably find out eventually. But going back to it, I think it comes down to your intent. So if you are in Wisconsin and you really do plan on moving to, use Austin, Texas, because that's where I love living, moving to Austin, Texas, then that's something I would call out within that cover letter, is letting them know that you are committed. If you get that job, you are going to move. And I think that's something that can really sway employers.
Yeah, actually, and this was obviously pre-pandemic, but friends of mine who said, they wanted to come to the big city, New York City, and work for a media company, I would always say, come to New York, crash on someone's couch for a month, use their mailbox, and put that on the top of your resume. That way you're here when they call for interviews, and also they see that you have a New York City address. So that was always my recommendations for them. So hopefully on the backside of the pandemic, people can maybe do that wherever they want to move to. And it's a great excuse to visit friends. So
yeah, I would do that, especially in New York, for that pizza, man. It's so good. So good.
There you go. Exactly. And another question that came in, and I think this is something that comes up a lot too, and part of your specialty, is the connection between a resume and a LinkedIn profile. So, people, they want to tailor their resumes and they want to say, okay, I'm applying to, IBM, I'm applying to, maybe a company, in my region or something like that. How do they maintain their LinkedIn profile while also tailoring their resume? Should they, what should they do to create some sort of equilibrium and balance?
Great question, because most people don't like to see someone's resume and then to bounce over to their LinkedIn profile and have it to be completely different, like a completely different person. So I do recommend making sure that it's at least somewhat similar in terms of the connection between the two. Now, the beauty about LinkedIn is, I'm a huge fan of it. Not just saying that because I'm on LinkedIn News right now, but I'm a huge fan of it because there is a lot more tolerance to include more information than a resume. What I mean by that is resumes should be as short as possible, because if you're sending 3-page resumes, 4-page resumes, you're going to start to turn off some recruiters and some people who are making those decisions. But your LinkedIn, I just think, can include so much more information because of the nature of the interface. It's expansive. You can open up and pop out specific positions within a job seeker's profile. So I recommend resumes get targeted to the position specifically that you're applying for, and the LinkedIn profile a little bit more general. And if you are applying for, say, 2 to 3 positions out there, I would find a way to use that LinkedIn profile to encompass all 3 of those positions, and really no more, because you don't want to get more general than that.
Got it. And we're almost out of time, and I think we have a few questions that I think apply to this idea, which is basically, during the pandemic, people want to stand out, and they obviously, I think the main tool that they use, even though networking is great, one of the main tools they use is their resume and their marketing materials, basically. So as a closer, what is your best advice for people who want to stand out with their resume and their cover letter? Is there something that you tell clients that you're doing purposely so you can sort of be that face in the crowd that they want to bring in for an interview?
Yes. Numbers and accomplishments all the way, because going back to it, I think one huge mistake that I see in resumes is that they're too general. And I think that numbers and accomplishments are the complete antidote to that, because there's something about them that pops out on a piece of paper or a resume that makes you stand out. And I know I can already hear people's voices saying, I don't know what numbers to include. I'm getting so stressed out about it. But I'm telling you, there are certain things that you can include, whether it's contextual, like maybe a number of the size of your team that you worked with, the amount of volume that you processed working as a front desk manager, or if you're in sales, showcasing increases in revenue or things like that. But there's something very magical and special about numbers and showcasing results that can really make you stand out.
I think that's a fantastic idea, especially sort of when you rack your brain and you sort of say, what are my accomplishments? It almost makes you feel better to say like, oh yeah, I could do that. It almost gives you a boost of energy too. So, but thank you so much for joining us today, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Definitely. And hopefully people were watching at the bottom of the screen. We had the link to your profile. You post a lot of great information, so people should be following you. So, you'll be tagged obviously in the post above the video, but also, if you could navigate to this link and follow Chris as well. So thank you so much for joining us. And then for all of you out there, if you want to join us next week, our producers have just shared the upcoming link for the show in the comments. So click on it and click Remind Me. We're going to have Tristan Layfield, who's the owner and head career coach of Layfield Resume Consulting. He will be joining us next Friday, September 4th at 12 p.m. So be sure to click the Remind Me button on the post in the comments or in the link above, and you will get a notification when we go live. And as always, I want to remind you to stay safe and be well while between this week and next week, because the only way you can get hired, the only way you can be a good candidate is if you're healthy enough to do so. So be sure to follow the recommendations of your local health officials and government officials, because you want to stay safe. And obviously, it's tough being a job seeker. Remember that we're all rooting for you. Everyone in the comments wants to see all of you succeed. So you're in this together. We're in this together, as we say in LinkedIn. So I look forward to seeing you next Friday. And until then, best of luck and be well.